learning algorithms, all these things. And this usually, we call this, recommendation engines, but they're much, much more than that. It's very simply how you can utilize machine learning and AI to not only tell you the projections, but to tell you these are the best insights. These are, based on those insights, these are the best decisions that you can make today to drive your business forward, right? So very simply, analysis is from reporting to insights instead of just, and this was, this was the hype about 10, 15 years ago when people were starting to realize how much data we have and what the, what the analytics and BI tools that we have can help us with. And then it grew into exponentially into predictive analytics very fast. And, once machine learning was democratized, it's now the era of what machine learning can do for me using my data, right? Next slide, please, Abby. So we're going to talk very quickly about best practices here. In order for you to have a good data-driven decision-making process in your business, you need to first establish clear goals. What is it that you want to achieve out of this, right? What kind of business insights, what kind of decisions you're trying to make? So start from there. Start from what is the decision that you're trying to make, right? That's one. Two, you need to ensure that you have all the necessary data infrastructures. Okay, so you have to do this gap analysis before you start working. What is it that you have? What is it that you don't? In order for you to get to that decision, right? So you have to be laser focused. For me to be able to make a decision in sales, am I tracking all the necessary data points in sales? That's one. Two, is it all in one place? Am I tracking them offline or online? Am I tracking them in a way that is transferable to a database, to a data lake, to some way that I can actually ask my, my technical team to go in and, divine a solution for me, or is it all scattered everywhere, etc.? And this is where a lot of the, heavy lifting should be done in this gap analysis and the technical infrastructure setup. And then from there, you need to identify, okay, so what are my indicators? What are my objectives and key results? What are my KPIs? What are the metrics that I want to measure? And in that sense, this is the decision I should be looking at every day, right? So we always say this, right? If there's only one number, you as a person in your business, what is the one number that you should be looking at every day? That's where all the decisions should be, right? And this is different than having vanity metrics, right? Vanity metrics are like having, number of subscribers, right? If you have number of subscribers, but they're not active, right? What is that for you? Can you commercialize that? If you have number of active users, but they're not paying customers, right? Can you monetize that? So eventually, if you're looking at the growth of your business, you have to be very strategic with that one number that you're looking at every day, no matter what you are in the business. If you're, the director of sales, HR, marketing, wherever you are, there is this one number that's your top priority, and then everything comes after. And this one number is what you need to, to develop all your entire flow, all your entire process, all your entire map around that number, to be able to say, at the end of the day, I was able to transform my decision-making process for, revenue growth from being very subjective. We look at, performance in this very scattered way, to now being very, airtight process that is driven by data. We know why we're looking at it this way. We know why we are making those decisions. And then we come back, we review, we iterate according to our new findings. And the fourth thing after this comes is focus on building the culture of data-driven decision-making throughout your organization. And this is basically usually the most crucial piece, right? Which is change pushback. Change management always has this pushback in any organization. If you've been in any transformation process, there's always pushback. There's always someone that says, no, we've been doing it fine, don't screw it up, right? It's working, don't touch it. So change management is a very important thing. And in that sense, there is always the dynamic of balancing between politics within the organization and, having the right support from the right, people with authority within the organization. Meaning there is a must that you have to have, which is buy-in from people that can drive the decision making, that can drive the culture, that can drive, the entire organization to adopt something, right? So if you're at the top of the organization, this is great. You can enforce it on everyone. But if you're not at the top of the organization, you have to have the key personnel in the organization at the C level, at the VP level, wherever they are, that can push from the top down to make sure that everyone is in line. That's one. And the other part is culture, right? And culture comes from results. Culture always comes from results. So we always say there's 1 or 2 cycles that have to happen before people realize, oh, this actually has an impact. Oh, that person was able to drive sales, in that sense, using that tool. What is that tool, right? This is now the new hype. This is now the new, very interesting, sexy thing that everyone wants to look at. What is that tool? What is that solution? What is that way that person's working that's making them very successful, right? And at the end, the 5th best practice that I want to talk about here is developing a plan that scales, right? It's not just about something that you can use today. It's about what can grow with you as a business. You can't say, okay, at the moment I only have 5 sales reps, or 5 people in HR, or 5 people in such and such department. We'll have everyone track their numbers offline in Excel. At the end of the month, we'll have them all combine things manually. And yes, it works for the first 5 people. 10 people is going to be a little bit harder. 20 people, it's going to be a mess, right? So design something that is scalable, something that can grow with you while you grow your business. The whole idea of having data-driven decision-making is, 1, making sure that you're objective in your decision-making, and 2, making sure that the heavy lifting of overanalyzing and overthinking about your decisions is taken off your shoulders. So if you are just entrenched in the technical piece of, let me bring the data parts together so I can look at the report and then look at the insights, and then you end up not having time for the insights and not having time for the decisions that the growth that matters for your organization. You won't have time for it, right? So those are the 5 key best practices that we wanted to share with you today. And we'll go to the next slide now. So a quick and very, very, very high level process of how you can do a decision transformation process in your business. I think phase 1 is the most crucial one, because this is where you design the roadmap. And like I said, designing the transformation roadmap is usually a place where it's an all hands in. It's an all hands in. You have to have the stakeholders involved. You have to have a top-down approach enforced. You have to have everyone that has to do with the numbers, right? So if you say, we're designing a process for making decisions for, the growth of the business, and we don't take into account, what salespeople do to close a call. You don't have your COGS, right? It's just driven by, by the strategy organization, or the strategic, heads of the organization, without taking into account what are the actual implications on the ground for this. You have to have stakeholders. Stakeholders don't just involve, management of those functions, but the actual function personnel that are actually making the tasks, that are actually doing the work on the ground. And so yeah, so designing the roadmap has two sides of it. Basically, there's the business side. What are the decisions you're trying to make? What are the metrics that you're looking at? How they're calculated? All these important things, and also the technical side. So the technical side is what infrastructure you need, what tools are best used for this, and are there any best practices out there that you can use? Is it, this cloud environment versus that cloud environment? We all use either AWS or Azure, or is there something out there more that we can use? Should we use Snowflake or MongoDB? Should we use, on the front end, should we use, Power BI, Looker, Tableau, or anything else? What are the best practices here? Why should you go one way instead of the other? This is all done in the transformation roadmap. Phase 2 is just bringing all of this to life. Phase 2 is taking all that good stuff that you've designed, all the map, all the all the planning that you've done, and just implementing on it. And you implement on it basically in an incremental way. So every time you develop something, you launch it, you test it, you take back feedback and you iterate. You take back feedback and iterate, because 99.9% of the time, nothing makes sense until the business user sits down in the day-to-day environment and says, okay, that number, why is it up? That number, why is it low? Right? And then they start drilling through, and they come back to the technical thing and say, can I have a drill through here that shows me, the detailed breakdown of this, so that I can actually track it more, efficiently, so I can make more decisions and better decisions, etc. Right? So this is phase 2, basically bringing that plan to life. And phase 3 is realizing the value and then managing growth. Realizing value means that you have to have a tangible metric that you are tracking your progress with. What is this? What is all this project bringing to the table for you? Did you cut down costs? Did you cut down any type of time? Did you cut down any type of inefficient process steps? And are you realizing any growth in your revenue accordingly? Are your margins higher? Are your revenue bottom lines higher, etc. Right? So you have to realize this and then keep track of it, and also manage the growth of your transformation. If it worked here, let's do it also here, here, and here. Right? So prioritize, implement, iterate, and repeat. Right? Next slide, please. So very high level for anyone that's not very familiar with how the technical backend works. Again, this is pretty standardized. It's usually customized according to each company's environment, each company's needs, each use case, even within each company, and what needs to happen. So a very high level, you have your data sources scattered. You have your CRM system, you have your accounting system, finance system, HR system, any other systems, or even offline dashboards or external sources that you can connect to using APIs. All of these you bring into one place, and this place is called a data lake. So a data lake is a place where you gather all the data. It's not really organized. It doesn't have to be a data lake. It can just flow into a data warehouse straight away. A data lake is, the newer practice where you don't have to do the transformation before, you gather all the data. You can just gather everything in one place, and then democratizing analytics here becomes very easy to do. You can then, say, hey, e-commerce team, hey, retail team, hey, sales, marketing, HR, all operations, any other team. You can tell them, okay, now each of you will now think of their transformation, and the data is all in the data lake. Now let's design a plan for your decision making, right? And you say, okay, so these are the metrics that I need to look at. This is how I need to slice and dice them, all these things. And then this is where the data lake pulls the data into the data warehouse in a portable manner, and then the algorithms run on them. They produce dashboards 1, 2, and 3 for all the accountable parties. And the actionable insights, like we said, have to have a layer of data engineering involved, which is the layer where data is being gathered, data is being organized, and it's the heavy lifting process. It's, again, can't stress this enough. This is, a lot of people have went into data science wanting to, do algorithms and machine learning and whatnot, and then they realize they're spending 80% of their time, just cleaning data, getting data, organizing it, making it so that they can actually use it. So data engineering is usually the heavy lifting part of any project. Comes after that either the advanced analytics piece, or the data science piece, the machine learning piece, or AI piece, or both of them combined to get to an actionable solution, right? A solution that you can use for actionable insights. So this is pretty high level what the technical map can look like, and again, very customizable according to each company's setup and each function's needs. Next slide, please. So here we talk about common challenges, and I already touched base on some of them, but the most important thing to note is that those challenges are very normal. You won't have a single, time where you're working through a project that you won't have one, two, maybe all of them pop up. One is data quality, right? Data quality always pops up because, it's just an issue, right? Is the person entering the data entering it correctly? Was the number after it was entered, migrated correctly from one platform to the other? What happened when we calculated it? Did we aggregate properly? Did we not? All these things can render a number that's on the front end with the business user not trustable, right? And trusting the number is the key element, of making a decision, right? And it's, I've worked with a client before, they always used to say, it's the old cockroach theory, right? If we can't trust one number, why should we trust any of them? And this is very true. Although it does render you a bit skeptical and a bit, cynical in times, but still you have to realize that data quality matters. If you can actually defend all the numbers on your front end, whether it's coming from from a BI tool or from a custom built analytic solution, you have to be able to defend all the numbers on your solution to the business user. If they scrutinize one number, why do I have 10 accounts here? I thought I had 11. You have to be able to say, no, the 11th one was deleted, or was a duplicate, or whatever the reason is, that your number is accurate, right? That's a very important thing. And for the business user to be able to look at it and say, okay, now that I trust this process, I can now make the decisions. That's a very important thing. Next one down is lack of organizational buy-in, and we talked about it in change management, right? So the pushback for change is very, very normal, and to be able to go from a place where it wasn't done like this before to now it being the standard and normal thing, it has to have two key elements. One, again, formal organizational structure. So it has to come from the top down. You have to have the buy-in from the top, management, and then trickle it down further. And also you have to have success stories. You have to have those, very interesting people that have used it and it's now working, and I want to have that same success. So it has to be that kind of, appealing solution for everyone. And the third piece, of course, resistance to change. Again, it has those two elements with it. Skills gaps is usually something that is very tricky to tackle, and I'll tell you why. If you're on the business side and you're asking your technical team, can you do this for me? They'll always say yes, right? They always say yes. So in order for them to realize, internally at least, in a frank and honest way, what, this is a skill gap that we don't have. Let's have someone, from outside step in and do it for us. It needs a very high level of, one, job security, and two, confidence in what they're actually doing for the organization, right? So if you ask someone to do, a certain project for you, and they're confident enough that their value is still there for the organization, they won't tell you, you know what, I can do anything, just give it to me. Because these, more often than not, people who take on projects that they're not well equipped, they don't have the best skills, or they tend to do, a half decent job, to say the least, and then it becomes, a burden on the organization's, conscious of, or their appetite for anything related to data-driven decision support, right? If I come and say, technical team do this project for me, they do a half decent job, I have data quality issues, it's not, the look and feel isn't great, I can't really use it for my decisions, it's not reliable, the next time I think about it, it just burdens me. I don't want to do it anymore, right? And if someone comes to me and says, let's do this, I'll say, no, you know what? We've tried this before. It was a waste of time and money. We'll just keep things the old way, right? So skills gaps don't just, hinder progress. They can actually, hinder growth very, very badly and very negatively. So this is a message, for any executive, any person with authority within an organization. Before you actually, ask the team to take on a project, have it assessed in a neutral way. Is this project a good project? And then ask the question of, what are the skill sets needed for this? What are the infrastructures, pieces needed for this? And then if you have this objective list, then match it against the team and see, okay, does the team actually know this? If not, then let's look for support. If they do actually have it, then let's start working on it straight away, right? Next slide, please. All right, so I'll spend now some time on some case studies, and those case studies are actual, actual real life examples of how data-driven decision making can actually impact, a part of the organization, whether it's a large organization, medium-sized, or small organization. Always there is need for, decision making there that can be done using data, and it's always usable in that sense, right? So I'll start with an example that we did with GSK Consumer Health, very specifically. We worked with their global product portfolio management team, and it was really interesting time. The organization was going through a migration. There was a joint venture happening. So there are probably 5 or 6 different pieces of the entire project that can be talked about as their own projects. But I'll just talk about very high level. The impact at the end of the day was being able to decrease the time to action by 80%. That's huge, right? So if you think of an organization as large as GlaxoSmithKline, Consumer Health, needing to make a decision, and then instead of taking a month, it's now down to less than a week. This is huge, right? Because time is money, and money is what business is about, right? And then also the other piece was saving 30% of their executives working on those analyses. And here I'm not talking about analysts analyzing data and bringing them. I'm actually talking about high-paid executives that are looking at reports that came to them from analysts and trying to figure out, okay, so what's the best move here, what to do and what not to do. So again, 30% of the time of a high-paid executive is significant for a company, right? Because when you free up 30% of their time, now they're actually free to work on what they were actually hired to do. So what the situation was in a very high level is that the centralization of data was one of the issues. Another one was making sure that the prioritization of projects, what are we launching, where are we launching them, all these things are done in an objective way. And so we you know we did a whole plan for it. We worked through the centralization piece. It was a lot of data migration that happened. And again, this was the heavy lifting of the project. Although the fun parts were the parts that came after that, where we sat down with the stakeholders and said, okay, now that we have all these data points, let's talk about how you're making the decision on what you're launching, when and where, and let's design together some sort of a model that fits all the purposes for everyone within the organization, and also makes things streamlined. So there was another issue that within each place, every place in the organization, there is someone that's looking at the same metric, but with a different lens, right? Calculating it in a different way. And that's usually an issue with with metrics, as well as that you have to standardize the way that they are being calculated across the board. So after doing all the migrations, sitting with the stakeholders, designing the plan for prioritization, how we're going to do the prioritization, what kind of resource allocation models we're going to track, what is the best way to showcase them for being used within the meetings, etc. We were able to reach that. And just to put something in front of you guys, we're talking about a meeting where a governance meeting where people from literally around the world would come in and start talking about projects, etc. Instead of saying, okay, highly paid executives that are here for a week, we're going to take a break, go do some research on what are the impacts if we cancel this one, if we add this one, and if we do all these things. We go away, we come back after a week or two, and then make the decision depending on the impact. Or no, the impact is so high, so low, we're not going to make that decision. We're going to talk about it again next quarter, right? So these things could have happened. These things are actually, real life scenarios that can happen and can cost dearly. It's now live within the meeting. We're looking at the numbers. We're looking at, okay, so what's the impact? Let me take this one out. Let me put this one in. Now I see the impact on the business. Now I see where I can make money, where I can lose money, and I can make those decisions for, for a global company such as this. And yeah, the result is, again, decreasing time to action 80%, 30% of the time they got it back. And of course, the thing that we can't really share what it means, but double the innovation growth margin. This was one of the key elements, the key metrics that they were looking at, and we're talking about tens of millions of dollars of impact on the business. So that's in a nutshell. A glance of one element of the work that was done with GSK Consumer Health. Next slide, please, Seki. So another example that I'm trying to give you guys ideas to think about here, right? So it's not just about innovation products. It can be like this case in HR. And we'll give other cases as well. But wherever you are in the organization, there is always an element, there is always a decision that you're trying to make, and there is some data behind it, or some data somewhere that you can actually leverage to make that decision in a better way. So this case is an interesting one. So GSmart is a human capital consulting firm, and so basically they do psychoanalyses for companies and how they how they should or should not hire a person for a certain job, etc. So the question was very simply, right, are we giving the right recommendation? Is the person that we gave the recommendation to hire, was the person that we gave their recommendation to hire the right person according to their performance after that in the organization? And if we liked someone so much that we gave them an offer, why did they leave, right? Or why were they separated from the company, whichever reason it is, voluntarily or involuntarily? So that was basically the very high level question here, right? And again, so data. So building the pipeline was a huge, enormous task. Just getting the right data points in the right formats, transforming them, et cetera, et cetera. Because you can imagine, interview questions, HR data. It's not numbers, right? It's not how many did I sell of this item. It's more complex than this, and it takes a lot of brain power to figure out this is the best way to look at it, right? So this is one element to it. Building the pipeline, and then designing the right algorithms, because you can imagine tens, hundreds of, literally, yes, hundreds of, elements, measures that you can think of and can, look at. So the question is, which ones should I look at? And, here comes, machine learning with, a very, smart solution to feature selection, but you have to, it's only as smart as the person using it. So we had to do a lot of work in terms of, okay, so what are we measuring against? What performance metrics are we looking at? All of these good things. So very high level, not to get into any details that can, put us in jeopardy. But the idea was, let's look at which features, which metrics, which measures, which dimensions of the data set are most relevant to this question of, are we hiring the right person? And if they were the right person, why did they end up leaving, right? And the projections that we have on this project are very, very interesting and quite significant. Actually, is that if we take the metrics or the features that we built, and we rerun the models according to, okay, let's hire that person, let's not hire that person, etc., we can see an average employment length, increasing by 30%, and a decrease in separation by 50%, which is, given the 2021 Great Resignation, it is something that would skew that number a little bit, but it's still a significant idea, how you can actually decrease turnover by 50%, using a data-driven method of, am I hiring the right person? Am I retaining the right person? Right? It's that simple. Next slide, please. All right. So if anyone is in the GCC, they know Zid, probably. So Zid is the Saudi Shopify. And we worked with Zid and the founding team of Zid back in 2017, 2018, I believe, through I think early 2019. So we worked with them when they were still starting. They had the project, it had just launched, just a little bit over maybe a few months, maybe a year of data, I think. And the question was, let's look at performance. And how can we leverage this, this historical data into, charting our way forward? And so there was a lot of work done, but it was essentially, the key element here is that, well, this is an e-commerce, startup, small scale, in another region, other than the first two examples, basically. So it was a very, very different, very different mindset, very different elements to be taken into account. But the high level was, how can we use this data to drive your growth? And so it was mainly about, we did a few things for them. One of them was their customer segmentation, their projections, where should they go, where should they not, marketing, where should they spend, where should they not, and so on and so forth. And as usual, the data, although it's an application or a web app, so the back end was a database, but there's still a lot of need for customizing this data set according to what you want to report on, and then gathering everything into one place, building the aggregations, all the algorithms, etc., so that you can have your statistical models run on them, and then they would be showcased on the dashboards. Again, not to get into too much details here, because I'm realizing now that I went a little bit over time. So the result of this was actually interesting. So we can actually be very proud of this fact that we helped them showcase those dashboards to investors, which wasn't something that we were aware of when we were doing them, by the way. Right, so we were building dashboards to help them, just manage their business and grow it, right? And then the co-founder actually told me after after we wrapped up the engagement, he said, what you did was very helpful for us, to the extent that we actually used that with our investors in our fundraising round, and this helped us raise the $2 million that we just closed, right? Which is quite the interesting thing, that even startups, raising funds, they can actually utilize data-driven decision making in their, just to showcase to the investors, right? We're not wasting time, we're not wasting money. We know what we're doing. So if you pour in your money, this is where it's going to go, right? We're going to invest in this area, that area, and we're going to be able to grow in that way, right? And by the way, again, someone in the GCC would know, but ZID announced a funding round of $50 million in 2022, late 2022, and they're now considered a unicorn on the Saudi startup map. So we'll take some of that credit. Of course, I'm joking, but still relevant, and still so proud of working with them. Next slide, please, Sevi. All right, so this is another area, totally different, plane here. Johnson Controls, for all of you who know them, it's one of the global Fortune 500 companies. So this area is in supply chain, basically. So a bit different, but still relevant to the overall idea of, there is a need for decision making using data in every single way. So their inventory system, their order attribution or order allocation system was not working so well, which made them have to do a lot of manual work, a lot of issues with customer satisfaction, a lot of issues that would, just trickle down everywhere, basically, from just one idea of, am I allocating the orders properly or not, right? And again, it's all about the back end. So after working through a back-end plan with them, we then automated an allocation model, building the pipeline, developing the algorithm for allocation, that can accurately, allocate resources. And here we're talking about, imagine having to say, I have an order coming in from the website. I have multiple warehouses across, the country, across the globe. Where is this order coming from? Which warehouse should it be allocated to? Okay, so this one. What about this other piece of the order? This actually only gets fulfilled with this other warehouse. So now the order has to split, and then it needs to be combined again, etc. So it's an issue of, again, someone in supply chain would definitely relate to this. It's an issue of a complex, quite manual and quite customized, infrastructure that is built, and then we need to be able to tell the client, this is when your order will be delivered, and also accordingly give those warehouse, managers, not managers, actually the system, what items need to be reshelved, what items need to be, restocked, and so it's, again, it's saving time, money, and a huge up in the customer satisfaction and promoting promoter score for the company, right? So after we did this, we can gladly say, or easily say, at least 80% accuracy of the orders, and I can actually say that it was over 90%. The 80% was because there were still some data integrity issues that were not within our control, basically. But because it was, it was flagged on the system, everyone knew that this issue was happening, and we didn't have the right authorization to work. Like, it wasn't within the scope that we can actually control, basically. But the other piece was, and this is a very important part, which is that we were able to save 90% of we were able to reach 90% time saved, right? In the time that would take to do all this work manually in their supply chain process, 90% of that time was saved, and yeah, so it's very distinct. It's very interesting. And it's very, I would say, it's an area that I believe has a lot of potential. Supply chain. There is, whenever you have areas like supply chain construction where things usually still go by a very manual, sometimes even pen and paper type of thing, there's huge potential there for, improvement and automation and bringing value through data. And that will bring us to, I believe, Q&A. Right, so I'll pause here for any questions. I'll hand it over to Savdeep to manage this piece. Thank you guys so much for listening patiently with me, and Savdeep, back to you.